All right, I've hit record. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming online to teach us about a new training platform is Roger, CEO of Restaurant Rockstars. Take it away, Roger.
Thank you so much, Derek. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am absolutely passionate about the hospitality industry. I am a 23-year veteran restaurateur, the CEO of Restaurant Rockstars. I'm the host of the weekly Restaurant Rockstars podcast, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later in this presentation. I'm the founder of both the SalesStars staff training system as well as the Restaurant Rockstars Academy. Again, I'll tell you more about those things. I'm an author of a book called Rock Your Restaurant, as well as the co-founder of a digital training hospitality application. So I've been in this business again for, well, going on 3 decades now, and I was really passionate about systems in my business. And I think that every restaurant needs to have systems. That means different things to different people, but it's kind of an exit strategy where if you can train your staff so well that they understand your business, they're reliable, and they sort of treat it as if they owned it, then that allows you to free your time. You don't have to be tied to your business, and you empower your staff to really run it in your stead if you're not there. They say you've got a system in place if you can walk away from your business for, say, a week, a day, a month, whatever, and you come back and it's well run and it's just as successful as before you left. And of course, that takes systems. So what are we talking about here? I was obsessed with 3 things, and I still am, because I am a personal restaurant coach. I do work with restaurants, some regular clients as well as new clients on a limited basis, of course. And I was obsessed with guest service. I believed very strongly then, as I do now, that if you can deliver a very high level of guest service, personal service, then you will capture the local market area. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was also obsessed with marketing and brand building and maximizing profit. I'm proud to say that my restaurants had double the net profit of the average full serve restaurant in this country. And my brand that I've since sold, I had 5 different concepts at one point, and then I sold them all. The last one was just at the end, well, kind of towards the middle of the pandemic. I was able to sell my last restaurant. But again, I sold most of them in 2014, and my flagship property that had 350 seats still dominates the competition today. And I'm really proud to be a customer there now. And I walk in, and a lot of the staff that I had, including my general manager that have been there 15 years, 18 years, are still there. And it's just so gratifying, being a customer and just watching the guests come in and people having great times and then watching the staff shine. And I had a lot to do with the training of that staff. So as a consultant or a personal restaurant coach, I ask this question to my clients all the time, and it's not a trick question, but I ask them, what business are you in and what are you selling? And most of the time, as you can imagine, the answer I hear is, well, I'm a restaurant owner or a general manager and I sell food and drink. And I stop them right there and I say, when I was running a restaurant, I was not in the business of running a restaurant. I was in the business of running a business. And those are 2 different things. And my products were not food and drink. They were entertainment, consistency, and a whole lot of good times. And that made all the difference for me. And that was kind of a paradigm shift. And the foundation of this business is hospitality. More on that in a few moments, but the staff that represent your brand are really brand ambassadors for your business. And they're either building your business or, they're sending customers to your competition. So that's sort of a paradigm shift that I like to share. And it really comes down to your approach. The pandemic has sort of shifted the way we need to operate our businesses. Prior to the pandemic, that word manager or management got thrown around a lot, as did the word delegation. And I hate those words because anybody can be promoted to a manager. Anyone can call themselves a manager, but that doesn't mean that they're competent or they're experienced and that they're motivating and inspiring to a team, as opposed to a leader who is not a figurehead locked in an office. It's someone who really inspires others and recognizes opportunities in others and gives them additional responsibility, develops their talents and then recognizes and rewards that talent for moving the business forward. And that's how I ran my businesses. And now we're delegation, same thing. Delegating is telling somebody what to do and maybe even how to do it. as opposed to empowerment that gives people that additional responsibility, nurtures them, develops them, maybe even gives them room to make mistakes or even to fail, and then really gives them accolades for reaching a higher level of performance, as well as the recognition and rewards. And I'll tell you more about the recognition and rewards that really worked for me. But now, with this labor crisis that everyone is having a challenge with labor, and it doesn't matter what part of the country. I speak to restaurant owners and operators all the time, and, labor is definitely a struggle. I don't need to tell you that. But you don't want to lose people either. Every restaurant has great people that you wish you had 20 more. And you don't want to lose them to someone else, because we've heard the horror stories. I mean, it's awful that some unscrupulous restaurants have even sort of camped out in other restaurant parking lots and, tried to pirate the staff by saying, when they get out of work, hey, I'll give you $3 more an hour if you come over to my place. And we've heard those horror stories. So it really starts with keeping your good people happy in addition to recruiting. So everyone wants to feel like their opinion matters. So giving your staff a voice is really important, as well as flexibility. And the flexibility part's a little more challenging now, especially if we are short-staffed. And restaurants have to close days and hours just because, they can't meet the demand with the staff they have and still deliver that hospitality experience. But everyone has a life outside of your business. Everyone has the unexpected, whether that's a child care issue or a doctor's appointment or whatever. So being flexible with scheduling and helping out as best you can and understanding other people's needs has obviously served me well as well. Reasonable raises, I mean, these are the highest wages we've ever had to pay, especially in the kitchen now. I don't need to tell you that either. I will be covering some ways to pay for that coming up in this presentation. But I was always successful by incentivizing my team for meeting certain goals. We used to have regular brainstorming sessions, and I'll tell you more about that as well. But people were incentivized for building my business and increasing profitability or sales and decreasing costs. I mentioned I bought a restaurant just before the pandemic, and the very first thing we did was we asked the people working there what was broken. Now, that was a really great approach, because whenever a restaurant is sold, the employees get really sort of, well, anxious about it. They don't know how the new owner is going to approach the business, treat them, as opposed to the prior owner. People are resistant to change, as you know. So the very first thing we did was, what's broken here? What can we do to make your jobs easier or more fulfilling or more fun or whatever it is? And people just sing like canaries. They'll tell you if you ask them. If you don't ask, chances are they'll just keep going doing their same thing. But that's definitely a way of building trust and credibility with them and developing a rapport with your team. And they told us lots of things, like the kitchen is really hot and there's no ventilation and there's no rubber mats under the equipment, and our feet get really tired at the end of the day. And I had a baker that said, oh, the mixer is kind of on the blink, and sometimes it works and I'm in the middle of a bake and the dough is in there, and then all of a sudden it stops working and I got to kind of jiggle the cord, and it's really annoying, and it's like we would not have known these things if we didn't ask. So we gave people a voice, we gave them flexibility, we paid them well, we gave them incentives for meeting goals, we fixed what was broken, and the team really rallied around us and really treated it like they owned it. And that's the way you build a dream team, at least one of the ways, and I'll tell you more about that. Also, recruiting. You can drive down any street in America, anywhere in Maine, certainly, and it doesn't matter where you are. You could be near the Maine Mall in Portland. You can be in Augusta or Bangor, or even a small town in Maine, and you will see the now hiring signs in every window or on every sign. And that's been going on for 2 years now, and it's kind of old. And even if that works in bringing a new person in, chances are you're getting someone else's C player, someone that isn't, doesn't have a true desire to serve the public, someone who's just going to show up for the paycheck and they're not necessarily going to be reliable. That's the C player versus the people you really want. Now, if we were to go back 28 years ago, when I started my first restaurant in Maine, I was starting a wood-fired pizzeria. And in the small town of Bethel up by Sunday River, a new hotel was going in, and they needed to hire everybody. They needed valet parkers and front desk staff and housekeepers and bartenders and servers at the exact same time I'm opening this restaurant for the first time. And I'm thinking, how am I possibly going to staff this place? Well, I had one really great server, one of my first hires, and I would call her an A player. And I simply just, I decided to do an incentive system right then and there. And I said, you know what, who do you know that might not be happy in their current job, who, is treated like an expendable resource? It's not part, they don't feel like they're part of a team. They're just taking up space in a job, but you think they'd fit this new way of running a business and whatnot. And if you bring me those people, I'm going to give you $100 for every person that you refer to this business. And if they last 90 days or 3 months, I'm going to give that person $300. And I hired a whole bunch of people that way. And back then, almost 30 years ago, that sounds like a lot of money. But back then, as now, they say the average turnover in this business when you hire a new person is just 4 months. And it might even be less than that now, post pandemic, with this labor crisis. And the statistics say that it costs a restaurant anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 to hire that person, get them up to speed in the job, either fire that person or they quit, and then you have to replace that person and get them up to speed in the job, in lost hours and wages and productivity and all that. It costs thousands of dollars. And obviously no restaurant can afford that. So recruiting was really about incentives. And the best hires really are employee referrals. Now, Maine is fortunate, and I'm seeing this pop up around the country, but there are definitely temporary agencies that specialize in restaurants and hospitality. And here in the state of Maine, a good friend of mine is a gentleman named Daryl Deegan, and he runs a company called 86 and Company. And during the pandemic, he found me a kitchen manager. He found me several really competent line cooks, and they were temporary employees, and then there were full-time hires, and they specialize in all. And they take care of all the paperwork and the documentation. And yeah, it was like a Hail Mary when I needed it most. So if that's a problem you're having, I definitely suggest you reach out to Daryl at 86 and Company. But other states are popping up with similar companies as well. Customer referrals. Now, this is a great idea. I didn't think of it. I wish I did. On my podcast, I meet a lot of interesting people, and I sort of recorded an interview with the CEO of a big chain in Southern California, and they have 28 locations, and they are open 3 day parts a day: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So imagine having to staff 28 locations, 3 day parts a day. Well, they came up with this idea that they're going to offer their guests or their best customers gift cards, $250 gift cards for any new employee or new hire referral. And it's really worked out really well for them. And that brought in a lot of people. And the only catch is the person, again, has to last like 60 days. And they have a different philosophy, like I did, in terms of how they run their business, and they take care of their people and they treat them well. And they've got a very low turnover rate. But it's not $250 in cash, folks. It's obviously your food cost. So it's not dollar per dollar. If you've got a 28 or 30% food cost, it's literally 30 cents on the dollar to give a guest a gift card, and you might get a great hire out of it. So I think that was a great idea. We also traded quite a bit in our restaurant. And we traded gift cards for gift cards, which meant I went to non-competing businesses, whether they be movie theaters or, different boutiques or retail stores or whatever it was. And I said, hey, I'll give you a series of $25 gift cards in exchange for a series of your $25 gift cards. And then I used those for incentives within my business. And people were really happy whenever we had a sales contest or someone did something really great. We were giving out gift cards, again, pennies on the dollar. Internal marketing, not as many restaurants take advantage of this as they need to, but your guests could be potential sources of new hires. And we all have chalkboards, and some of us have table tents, and maybe we have bulletin boards in the bathrooms, but these are places that your guests will see that, hey, you need a host, or you need a busser, or you need a line cook, or whatever it is. You never know where your next employee might come from. So those are just a couple of ideas, but it really is centered around recruiting and not hiring. Company culture is super important. And our company culture was hospitality, family, and fun. Hospitality, of course, is the foundation of our business. It was all about family in our restaurant, where we wanted the guests to feel like family. We treated our staff like family, and we wanted everyone to have more fun. And the key to this was establishing accountability of our team. Not just hiring them and then turning them loose, and some of them work out and some of them don't. We had real detailed job descriptions and key results for every single position in the business. And we would sit down when a new hire came in with a job description, and we would go over line by line every single item on that job description for mutual understanding and agreement. And if that person agreed, yes, I understand what the expectations are on these primary responsibilities, they would initial next to each line item. They would just put their initials down and then they would sign the document. And that gave me, something that I could refer to make sure that they were all on track at different times. And every now and again, performance may deviate from what your expectations are or what that person agreed they could and would do in your business. And now you've got proof that you can pull them aside in private and sit them down. And, I used to use this book called The 1 Minute Manager, and I recommend it for everyone. The author is Ken Blanchard. It's a real simple, fast read. And it's not necessarily about giving them a 1 minute praise or a 1 minute critique. It could be 10 seconds. That's just the name of the book. But it's all about catching people doing things right and praising them for their performance. And then when that performance deviates from what the job description says and you pull them aside, I never used to say, okay, this is what you said you could do. I want you to go out there and do that. I would actually throw the ball in their court and say, we both agreed that this is what your responsibility was. And I'm not seeing that it's doing this or you're doing that. But I would say, what do you think you can do to get that performance back on track? And now the onus is on the team member to go back out and solve the problem and get back up to that level of performance. And then the recognition and rewards came in, and we had performance reviews every 6 months for everyone with a grade from A to D, how well they're doing in every one of those categories. And it really up-leveled the team. But it is about accountability and it is about fairness. And it's always about never reprimanding anyone in public in front of a guest or another team member. It's about doing those things in private, but we love giving them positive praise in front of guests and in front of team members. And the whole team up-leveled with that philosophy. So that's hospitality, family, and fun. Make it fun, keep it fun was kind of a mantra. And here's where the rewards come in. Every week we had a program called Difference Dollars, and it was really simple. And maybe I noticed somebody doing something that was going above and beyond their job, but any employee, any of my team members could nominate anybody for doing anything. And it was really kind of fun to have employees come up to me and say, hey, Roger, did you hear about what Sally did the other day? And I'm like, no, tell me about what Sally did. And a lot of these stories were really extraordinary. And maybe it was solving a guest problem, or maybe it was helping a team member. Maybe we had a brand new busser, and they're walking across the kitchen floor, and maybe they slipped, someone who had just mopped the floor, and the whole bus bucket goes up in the air and all the dishes and plates smash. And there just happened to be a server in the kitchen, and it wasn't her responsibility to clean up the mess, but she jumped right in there and she literally did a lot of the work to help this new kid. And that was making a difference. It could be anything like that. So I did it twice a week, on a Friday and a Saturday. Obviously, those are the two busiest times in most of our businesses. And I had 55 employees in my largest restaurant, but we did it in all of my restaurants. So on a Friday, I might have 25 or 30 people working, and the same on a Saturday. So just before the doors would open for dinner service, when everyone was getting ready, we'd gather everyone in the kitchen, and they all knew what it was. It was Difference Dollars time. And I would get up on my soapbox and say, this week's winner is Sally, and this is what Sally did. And I would go into glowing detail about what that difference was. And then I would give Sally a $20 bill and a can of Red Bull. And I would do the same thing on a Saturday for another nominated person. And for $40 and 2 cans of Red Bull, this really up-leveled morale. But it didn't stop there. I would then go into my office, and I had a template on the computer with kind of stars in the corners, and it said Difference Dollars big and bold. And then I would type Sally's name, also big and bold. And then again, in glowing detail, I would type what the difference was. And I would hand her a copy of the certificate, but then I would frame one. And when I sold that restaurant in 2014, I don't think there was a square inch of space on the walls of the kitchen or in the employee areas or in the employee bathroom or in the coat room. These differences were hung everywhere. And you could always notice whenever someone new was hired, you couldn't help but notice them reading all these differences. And it kind of spoke volumes about how we ran our business and how it was different. And that was the company culture. And people either fit that culture or they didn't. And we rarely, if ever, had to fire people because they kind of voted themselves off the island if they couldn't rise to that challenge and make a difference every day and deliver true hospitality. So $40 and 2 cans of Red Bull, and the ultimate guest experience was certainly up-leveled by that morale and by that program. Really simple stuff. The next thing we did a long, long time ago, we all work with Some of us work with the top broadline suppliers, whether that be Cisco or US Foods or Performance. Some of us work with smaller suppliers. We work with beer companies, whether that's Pine State or National, and Bow Street for liquor. And all these companies are out there, and we spend lots and lots of money every week with these companies, don't we? And we're loyal to them for years because this is a business of relationships. Well, I was in one of their company headquarters here in Maine once, a long, long time ago. And I was getting a tour. I hadn't done business with them for a while, and we did this annual sort of business review. And we walked by a conference room, and there's all this valuable merchandise sitting on the conference table. And there's electronics, and there's really great clothing items, and there's neon signs and sporting goods and different things. And I just happened to ask, what's all that stuff? And the answer was, well, we obviously do business with hundreds and hundreds of companies also. And we ask them for, a variety of merchandise, and we use it for employee incentives. But every year we get more things in than we can actually give away. And some of this stuff ends up collecting dust in the warehouse, and we're just clearing it out. And I'm like, wow, I've been doing business with you for a number of years, and we spend a lot of money with you every week. Can I have any of those things? Because I'd love to have some employee incentives. And I think that's when I learned almost 30 years ago, you don't ask, you don't get, because the very next day the truck showed up and just about everything on that table ended up in the back door of my restaurant with my delivery that week. So we actually cleared out a closet, and every single year we would ask our suppliers for things of value. It cost us nothing. And it was so gratifying to have a new employee, or really anybody, recognize them doing something, above and beyond, and say, hey, let's go take a trip to the closet. And whenever I said that to a new employee, they'd get all sort of nervous and jerky and a little anxious. And I'm like, no, it's a good thing, believe me. And I'd open the door and they'd see all this stuff. And I'm like, you see anything you like? It's yours. Thank you for doing what you're doing here. We really appreciate your approach to the job. And they'd walk out with something valuable, and that raised morale, and it cost us nothing. So those are really simple recognition rewards programs. Okay, there's that word empowerment again, empowered managers. And again, I should change this to leaders, because I told you I don't like to use the word manager. So let's say empowered leaders grow your brand and your business. So we had incentive programs for our team leaders to do different things that help build the business and move it forward. So we gave out bonuses for key results. So
Hey, Roger,
maybe it was,
I hate to interrupt, but
no, it's fine.
your screen share is not on.
Oh, has that been going on since we started?
I had seen it earlier, and then I'm sorry, I got distracted by a call and
Yeah, no worries.
realized that it wasn't on.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me if you can see it again or when it comes on. That's unfortunate. Let me go back into Zoom. All right, let's try again, and I will catch up. Okay, can you see it now?
There we go. Now we've got it.
Goodness. Oh, I'm sorry this happened. All right, we're going to catch up to where I was, and we'll just keep on rolling here.
I
Okay,
apologize, everybody.
I'm very sorry as well. So manager, leader bonuses for key results. So creating a loyalty program that builds, new customer visits, or gets people to come back more often, increasing takeout or delivery services, creating a catering business, and additional profit centers, or just private parties and events during non-busy times. The Mug Club, I have to tell you, is one of the smartest things we ever did. We've all been in sports bars or different places that serve draft beer, and you see the mugs hanging from the ceiling. And there is nothing I've noticed in this business that is more powerful at creating what I call affinity, or a sense of belonging, or loyalty to a business, than a Mug Club. And we actually teach you in the Academy system how to create a Mug Club, whether you have a coffee shop or you serve draft beer. You can actually charge memberships. And depending on how many mugs you sell, it can be a sponsored program where it costs you nothing to bring the mugs in, and t-shirts and value added, and literally the members sell the club for you, and more people join over time. And when I sold my largest restaurant back in 2014, we had 1,200 people that belonged to our Mug Club. And it always amazed me how the bartenders got to know so many of the Mug Club members on a first name basis, and they knew what their favorite beer was. And as soon as somebody walked through the door into the bar, one of the bartenders would ring this giant bell behind the bar and make a big show out of it. and they would literally be pouring, they would get that person's mug and literally be pouring their beer before that person got within 30 feet of the bar. And if it was really busy, sometimes that mug would get passed from person to person and get into the person's hands before they even had to order their beer. And that was amazing service. And that's one of the reasons why the club grew, obviously that service, but it was a sponsored program. And now we can teach anybody to do that. But the 1,200 members, I think we charged at the time $55 per. And if you do this simple math, that was about $60,000 in free and clear cash flow that came into my business every year. And we could do capital improvement projects, and we could pay people, better and raises and incentives. And the Mug Club really sort of seeded that for us. But that may sound like a lot of money. And even if you sell a far less amount of mugs and you bring in $5,000, think about what that would do for your business if there was no expense towards that. All you have to do is give great hospitality to your guests. But here's the kicker: not only do we get that cash flow, but now these people suddenly came in much more often. If they used to come into the business maybe twice a month, now they're in 2 and 3 times a week. And the increased spending and the club camaraderie and the special prizes and the recognition and all that. And we had a lot of recognition and rewards programs tied to our Mug Club members as well. And they had a lot of extra value added benefits. So again, we can teach you how to do that. And I'll tell you more about the Academy later in this presentation. I also incentivized people to lower my costs. If they could stay in what I call the sweet spot, stay on target with your food and beverage and labor costs, people were incentivized for that. The Mug Club, my bar manager was incentivized for every mug he sold, he got a percentage of every sale, and built it from literally 0 to 1,200 mugs and got paid on every single one of them. So all these things built morale. They raised, people's loyalty to our business, created longevity, and just happier staff obviously led to happier guests. Cash cows are super important. If you're not familiar with that term, a cash cow is a menu item that contributes a huge amount of profit because it costs you very little to put on the plate, yet it has very high perceived value by your guest. By virtue of how it looks, how it's presented, how it tastes, all those things. And in many cases, they're byproducts of other things that are already costed out. So my biggest cash cow were wood-fired garlic knots. We made our own pizza dough every single day. And there was always, a measured dough ball that was weighed out to be the exact same consistency. That was very important for us. But obviously dough rises in the oven, and we had a dough roller, and it would roll out a consistent uniform dough. And it would always overlap the pizza pan by maybe 3/4 of an inch. So my pizza makers would take one of those pizza wheels, the cutters, and they would trim off the trimming around the edge. And then they would tie it into knots. And they would brush it with a little olive oil and sprinkle a little Parmesan cheese and a little minced garlic on there. And they would bake up in the oven to be these big knots. And those were absolutely free because that dough, those knots, were actually costed out in that dough ball that went into the next pizza that we charged full price for. And the only cost to me was the homemade ramekin of homemade marinara sauce and, the little bit of olive oil and minced garlic that got sprinkled on top. And I figured at the time it cost me about 28 cents maybe to put out the homemade marinara. And we charge $10 on the menu for these. So you're looking at, like $9.70 something cents profit every time we sold this appetizer. It became our most popular appetizer. And then I suddenly realized I could give them away. That would be a way of drawing people, new customers into the business. Whenever I started a new restaurant, we always used that program. So that was something that, the idea came from, and I empowered my kitchen manager to make all that, my kitchen leader to make that work. And then ordering efficiency. The person was incentivized for, really solid ordering, so there was no waste or spoilage. And then off the menu specials that were more expensive, that would round out the regular menu and give my team things to talk about at the table. And all those things were just super profitable. So we incentivized our team leaders for coming up with all these business building ideas. All right. We also had a once a month brainstorming session with the entire team, and it was all about efficiencies and best practices and that sort of thing. So I incentivized everyone to come up with new marketing ideas or new profit centers, such as catering I mentioned earlier, or anything that they knew would perhaps save us some money, the cost saving programs or preventative maintenance. You'd be surprised at the employees or the team members you have in your business that see things every single day, but they're not really empowered to bring them up. And they see silverware being thrown in the trash or whatever it is. And if you empower them and give them incentives for either increasing your sales and profits or decreasing your costs, I always used to give them a percentage of it if it could be trackable. So we'd have these brainstorming sessions where I'd bring in the flip charts and the dry erase markers, and I'd say, no idea is too crazy here. And we had these routine brainstorming sessions based on what they saw, based on what they thought. Hey, Roger, have you thought about trying this? And I'm like, hey, I looked at all the ideas, and those that looked really promising that I thought we could track the cost savings or the increased profit, if I could track it and if it happened over time, I gave someone an incentive as long as they worked in my business for as long as that kept generating additional profit or cost savings. So there's another idea that worked really well for us. All right. Let's talk about paying high labor costs. That's the biggest challenge right now, isn't it? Now, we've all been through the pandemic and obviously the Paycheck Protection Program and the Restaurant Revitalization Acts. All these things were really, really important. And you really had to research these things and be tenacious, but obviously it was a benefit to belong to Hospitality Maine because you were the first to hear about these programs. But so many restaurants missed out on a lot of that money simply because either they didn't have the bandwidth or the wherewithal, or they just didn't jump on it immediately. And obviously the whole country was jumping on a lot of these programs. And yeah, it became a little bit onerous, but I thought back then I owned that restaurant during the pandemic and nothing was more important. That became job one for me because I empowered my staff to run my business and I really focused in on taking advantage of all those programs. And I have to say that was instrumental in saving our business, in addition to all the pivots that we had to do as well. But there is still something, and I'm hoping that everyone's taking advantage of this already, but the employee retention tax credit is incredible. You're paying obviously payroll taxes every single quarter on something called the 941. And since the pandemic, you can now get up to $26,000 per employee for 4 quarters in 2020, and then 4 quarters in 2021. And you can get all that money back, and it takes a little bit of time, but you have to apply for it. And your payroll company used to do it, but now, there's CPA firms that have popped up around the country and it's become a really big deal. And you don't have to pay for their service until you actually receive that money in your bank account, but it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in my case, it certainly was, and it was well worth the time. And I worked with a firm that helped me get all that money back. So if you haven't taken advantage of this yet, you absolutely have to. It may run out at some point in the future. They may change that rule, but as of today, you can still apply for 6 different quarters. And depending on how many employees you have in your business, if you can demonstrate, either a shutdown, a partial shutdown, or a decrease in sales during the pandemic, you can get a lot of money back. So I definitely recommend you look into that. Also, trading for services. Super important. We already talked about the gift cards, but even before the pandemic, I never wanted to pay dollar for dollar for things if I could trade for them, because certain people love trade. They love being able to walk into a restaurant and being able to sign for the check and not having to pay for it. And we used to take advantage a lot for linens and for fresh flowers and for a number of things we traded for. And that worked out really well. And then I already told you about trading gift cards for gift cards. You can use that as employee incentives. But the most important thing I have to tell you right now is maximizing the profit on every sale. But before you can do that, you have to maximize your sales. So it's about being resourceful. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about hospitality. We all have our own definition of what that word means. I've already told you it's the foundation of this business. But I learned a long time ago that hospitality is absent when something happens to your guest. And hospitality is present when something happens for the guest. And that's as simple as it gets. And we trained our staff every single day on the meaning of that word. And we wanted every single person, either front or back of house, to deliver true hospitality, whether you interacted with the guest or you're just making the food or the drinks. We wanted love and care and, real attention to detail to go into every single thing that we served. And we had checks and balances because presentations were so important. And we had something called wow factor. And wow factor really started with a plate presentation where you might put a plate down in front of a guest And they didn't want to cut into it right away because it looked so amazing. They just looked at the other members at the table and said, wow. And then, the cameras would come out and they'd take a picture, and that was all free marketing on social media and that kind of thing. And that's great. I certainly encourage that. But I suddenly realized wow factor and that's hospitality as well. So know this, your guests are not just coming into your businesses for the food. They may think that's why they're going out to eat. Maybe they didn't feel like cooking that night, but maybe it's a special occasion. But every single time in the restaurant should be a special occasion for anyone you serve at any time. So that's a little paradigm shift too. Some people are just going out because it's dinner time and they don't feel like cooking, but it's up to you to deliver amazing dining experiences. And I'm 3 weeks out from my very first grand opening after never being in business before. And I had to go to New Hampshire to source a dough mixer. I was buying one of those 60-quart Hobart mixers because I already told you we wanted to make our dough from scratch every day. And it's about noontime, and I'm driving down the road, and there's a sandwich board sign at the end of a driveway, and it says wood-fired pizza now serving. And I'm like, terrific. That's exactly the kind of restaurant I'm going to start, or I'm starting. I'm going to go in there and I'll probably learn something. So I parked the car and I walked in. The very first impression was a teenage host, and he's kind of leaning on the host podium. And I would think that as soon as somebody walks through the door, he's going to kind of, look a little bit more professional, a little more poised or put together. He never stopped leaning on the podium. And now I'm walking towards him. And as I'm walking towards him, now I notice he's blowing bubble gum, and he's blowing bubbles as and that's the first impression of this restaurant. And I'm like, terrible impression. As soon as I got to the podium, he looks at me and he's like, "Are you here for lunch?" And I looked at my watch and it was like 12:05. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here for lunch." And the next thing I know, there's a menu holder attached to that podium. He pulls a menu out and he sticks it in my hand, and then he points across the room and he's like, "See that table over there? It's yours." And then he goes back to leaning on the podium and blowing bubble gum. And I'm like, "Are you kidding? Like, you don't even care to walk me to my table and, tell me a little something about the restaurant and make sure I'm comfortable and tell me who's going to serve." No, none of that happened. So I'm like, strike one. So now I'm sitting at my table, and I sat there for 8 or 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. And I see service team pass me by on the left and on the right, and no one is making eye contact with me. And I'm thinking, do they even know or care that I'm sitting here? Well, I had plenty of time to look at the menu, and they had 10 or 12 different special pizzas on there, and they all sounded pretty good. So when a server finally got around to coming to my table, I asked her the question. I'm like, "Well, what can you recommend, or what are your favorite pizzas?" She looked me in the eye and she says, "I can't recommend the pizzas." She's like, "I don't eat them. They're too expensive." Whoa, that scared me to death because, again, a couple weeks out from opening, and I suddenly realized that what the staff say and do can absolutely sabotage your business if they're not trained to serve and sell. Now, that was long before the age of the internet. And that was long before there was online reviews and Yelp and TripAdvisor and all that. But now it's more dangerous than ever that if your staff are not trained to deliver amazing dining experiences, you're going to get a whole bunch of negative reviews based on what they say and do. So that's the moral of the story, true story. This is kind of another one of those mantras. We always believe that when staff are when staff are having more fun and making more money, then your guests are having more fun and they're spending more money. And that's kind of like capturing lightning in a bottle. Delivering these amazing dining experiences actually increase sales in your business. And I mentioned earlier that nothing is more important than increasing every sale, every guest, every time, and then maximizing profit on every sale. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that right now. I believe that I've always believed that this business is show business. It's about entertainment. And I always train my staff, again, when the doors open for business, it's like the curtain going up and it's showtime. And you're all not, hosts and bussers and servers and bartenders. You're actors and actresses on stage. And your mission is to educate, inform, and entertain every single guest. And I had a pet peeve now, as I do now, and it's that word, the order taker, because I believe that order takers equal ordinary experiences. in any restaurant. And it doesn't matter, before the pandemic, I traveled a lot for Restaurant Rockstars, and I'm doing a lot of that now. And I speak across the country at different events, mostly for Performance Foods, but I also work for state restaurant associations and that kind of thing. And I eat out a lot. And you'd be surprised at how many opportunities are lost every single day in restaurants that are leaving thousands of dollars on the table because people might be personable and friendly, but they're not taking guests on what I call the magical journey. They're not turning me on to an experience because they know what I might enjoy and appreciate, telling me special things that, are obviously going to increase sales for the business and give the guest a better experience. So that's lost opportunity. It's about maximizing return on investment also. Your business is real estate, and you might take all the risk of business. You're paying the lease every month, or you're paying the mortgage if you own the property, and the cost of goods and the payroll and the insurances and the expenses go on and on. And that's your risk. And what are we doing? We're hiring people and giving them an immediate opportunity to make money in our business, but we're not training them to maximize opportunities and to make more money for the business and give these great experiences that I'm talking about. So why wouldn't we expect that with a little bit of training, we're not going to up-level our operation and our organization and give the guests a better experience while increasing our bottom line? I was all about that. It's a captive audience, isn't it? It's like, unlike owning a retail store, and this is not to put down anyone that owns a retail store, but one, you have a cash business. Every time you sell something, you get the cash immediately. And it's everyone that walks in the door is ready, willing, and able to spend. If you have a retail store, you purchase all this inventory, and sometimes it hangs on the shelves or on the racks, and you might not make sales every single day. You might not make significant sales, and people walk in the door, and you might ask them, "Can I help you?" And unless they specifically know that they're looking for something that you're selling, most likely you're going to hear, "Oh, I'm just looking. If I need any help, I'll ask you." And they'll walk out without obviously buying something. And that happens in retail across the country every single day, depending on the store. But every single person that walks into a restaurant is ready, willing, and able to spend. And it's a series of opportunities from start of the meal to the end of the meal. And it's up to your team to recognize these opportunities and deliver these experiences and tell them what we know they will enjoy and appreciate. And in so doing, your check averages will rise. So opportunity, I love that word opportunity. It's fickle and it's fleeting because every table, again, represents a series of opportunities. And that's every guest seated at every table. And from start to finish, whether it's the appetizers, it's the soups and salads, it's the desserts, it's the entrees, it's the bottles of wine, it's the specialty cocktails, it's the retail merchandise. There's so many opportunities, and so many of those are lost every day. And once you miss an opportunity, it's gone forever. Would you do one thing right now? Please close your eyes just for a second. I want you to imagine an iceberg floating on the surface of the ocean. And as soon as you've got that in your mind, I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'll show you where I'm going with this. If everyone has that iceberg in mind, here's what this is all about. So look on top of the water. That's a huge iceberg you all just imagined, right? It's so big it sank the Titanic and all that sort of thing. Well, very few people realize, and you probably might not have thought about this in a while if you ever thought about it, but the largest mass of an iceberg is actually hidden and unseen beneath the surface of the water. And what's on top of the water is a fraction of the size. Well, I love this analogy because it perfectly represents opportunities in your restaurant where the top of the water, that ice on top, represents daily sales in your business that just happened. That host that's leaning on the podium gives the menu to the guest, and they look at it and they decide what sounds good to them and they order it. And the order taker just has the pad and pen in hand and either writes the order down or commits it to memory and brings the food and all that sort of thing. And that is an ordinary experience. But below the surface are all the hidden opportunities that are available to increase check averages, deliver a better experience, and enhance the overall meal. So what's an example of an upsell? Somebody orders a gin and tonic and the server says, "Would you prefer Bombay Sapphire or Tanqueray 10?" And they plant a seed in that guest's mind, and 9 times out of 10, that sounds great. And you just upsold to a premium liquor, and your check average just increased by several dollars. Add-ons. I've always believed that every menu should have numerous add-ons. Salads are a great example. You can offer multiple cheese options like feta cheese, blue cheese, goat cheese. You can offer chicken or shrimp or fresh Atlantic sea scallops that enhance that Caesar salad. These are all add-ons. Most profitable items, I'm going to get to that. Nothing is more important than knowing which items in your restaurant are the most profitable and then training your staff to suggest those every table, every time. This is how you pay those high labor costs. You don't want to sell items that are not contributing a significant amount of profit. Bottles of wine. I've always loved bottles of wine. It's like having another person at the table ordering a $25 entree or even more, 25, 50 bucks, 75 bucks, depending on the price points of your wines, that isn't actually taking any more effort from your service staff to serve that person. And obviously a bottle of wine with a 2-top goes really quickly. It goes even faster with a 4-top. You can even sell another bottle of wine. And Maine always had that rule where as long as, you stapled the bag, they could order a second bottle. And if it wasn't finished, they could take it out of the restaurant and finish it later at home. So that was a beautiful marketing, tactic that we used forever in our restaurants. And we sold lots of wine because of it. Desserts go without saying, but let's talk about coffee. Lots of people order coffee at the end of their meal. But when was the last time you went out to dinner and the server suggested, would you prefer Jameson's or Kahlua or Bailey's in that coffee? Maybe with a dollop of whipped cream and some chocolate shavings on top. It's the perfect end to your meal. You'll really enjoy it. Sold. Bring me the Baileys. I love Baileys, and there's another opportunity that is lost in a lot of restaurants. Retail merchandise. I talked earlier about building a business, not running a restaurant, building a brand where people actually will pay you to wear your merchandise and market your business outside your restaurant. The Mug Club was a huge example of that, and we sold lots of retail merchandise. We actually had a photo contest where if you wore any of our merchandise items anywhere around the world and took an interesting photo, we had all these free prizes again from our suppliers, some of them really nice prizes. And we had an annual photo contest. And inside the walls of the restaurant, we filled it with photographs of people wearing our merchandise all over the world. And some of them were really interesting. I remember somebody had a friend who was on the Massachusetts State Police. He was a trooper, and he staged a photo on the side of the Mass Turnpike where he was being handcuffed by a state trooper in front of the car. He's up against the car, his face is against the windshield, and he's being handcuffed. And you can clearly see Mass State Police, and he's wearing a t-shirt from our business, and that won the photo contest that year. So people got really creative, and it was a hook. I love hooks because all of our guests would walk around and look at these photos, and what would it do? It would sell lots and lots of merchandise. So again, there's an idea. Not everyone has the space to do live music and events, but if you can carve out a little niche, people love acoustic guitar players, people singing songs that we all know and love and know the words to. And it keeps people in the bar longer. It keeps people ordering more drinks, and it's really cost effective. For $200 or $300, you can get someone in there for 2 or 3 hours, and it really increased alcohol sales. And then we obviously went on to big rock bands on weekends and all that sort of thing where we had cover charges. So that was just another profit center, another opportunity. But all of these things, the hidden opportunities, are what the order takers miss. And that's why I call this the domain of the sales star. Okay, pet peeve. I've always had this pet peeve against people asking what I call the yes/no question. And that is, does anybody want dessert? Can I bring you anything else? Order takers ask these questions, don't they? Well, the odds of making the sale when they ask yes/no questions are terrible. They're 50-50. Maybe the guest will say yes, and maybe more likely the guest will say no. So how do we increase our odds of making the sale? We give choices. Okay, choices improve the odds of making the sale. Now, follow me here because it's simple math, but it absolutely works 9 out of 10 times. If you can make something sound so good and describe it that the guest can see it and smell it and taste it before it even comes out of the kitchen, you've made the sale. But the key to that is offering 2 choices. Let's use desserts for an example. Now, there are 3 choices here. We've got choice A, which might be the chocolate peanut butter blast, and choice B might be the raspberry cream disaster, and choice C would be no. All 3 of those have an equal likelihood that they'll sound good to the guest, or the guest will choose that, of 33.3%. All 3 of those choices add up to 100%. But just by giving 2 choices, A and B, your team just doubled their odds of making the sale if they bring those things to life. Now there's a 66.6, or you might round it up to 67% chance versus a 33% chance the guest is going to say no. That's how you increase your odds of making the sale. And 9 times out of 10, it's a proven technique. I used it for almost 3 decades. My team obviously used that and they were knowledgeable. Product knowledge is the key to all these things because guests ask questions, don't they, all the time? And you never want your staff to say, I don't know, let me go ask my manager or my team leader. No, you want people to be knowledgeable, you want them to be empowered, but most of all, you want them to be well trained. Okay, let's get into menu costing. I mentioned knowing your most profitable items is the most important thing today because there are costs, inflation, and rising food costs and rising labor costs that we can't control. We can do virtually nothing about that. But what you can control is maximizing your sales and then again, maximizing the profit on every sale. So you really need to know which items are your most profitable. So it all starts with knowing what your plate cost is on every single item. Okay. And every single item has a certain number of ingredients in it and a certain quantity that goes into every single item. And that has a cost to it. And all this information can be found on your invoices, or the larger suppliers will provide what is called an order guide, which is literally a list of every single thing you buy from that supplier and how much it costs and what quantity it comes in, whether it's in the number 10 can or it's a side of beef or a case of lemons or whatever it is. And yeah, there's some simple math involved. You need a calculator and a pencil to figure this out, but it's vitally important that you figure out what it costs you to serve every single item on your menu. So just as an example, this is really great business in Maine. It's called Otto Pizza. And you probably had some of that because they're in at least 10 different communities in Maine. Now it's a growing business. And this is one of their most popular pizzas. It's actually my favorite. So this is one of their cost sheets. But obviously you can see that there's 8 ounces of dough and they make their own. I want you to see that the simple math is calculated here. And this is a spreadsheet that we offer in the Academy, along with a whole bunch of financial spreadsheets that are totally turnkey with audio tutorials. We teach how to do all this stuff, but let's just say that this calculates the plate cost in every item. And all you need to do is plug in the information from your invoices, your order guide. Well, you'll see in blue at the bottom, the plate cost total is $2.80, and that's the cost of all the ingredients. And I have to note that the very last item here that's 38 cents is a takeout container. And since the pandemic and we've had to shift to curbside pickup and delivery and takeout, you must absolutely include the cost of containers in the cost of that dish if it's actually being served to the guests. So $2.80 is what it costs them to serve this pizza. They charge $18 on the menu to the guest for the pizza. So doing the simple math, if you divide $2.80 by $18 menu price, the food cost in this item is 16%. Nice food cost, right? The profit for selling this pizza is obviously $18. Subtracting the plate cost of $2.80 gives you $15.20. So let's just assume for a moment that you have all of these plate costs. Now you've got a list in every single category. And when I say category, we've got an appetizer category. We've got a pizza category. If you sell pizza like I did, soups and salads, burgers and sandwiches, entrees and desserts. These are all categories. So obviously you need a cost sheet for every single item in every one of those categories. The next thing you need to do is rank them in terms of profitability. Now this profit on this pizza is $15.20. This might be the most profitable, or it might be right in the middle. So I would take each category one by one and then put them in order. This is number 1 most profitable, number 2, number 3, and so on. And then the next step, and this is obviously a template that we have as well. This is a menu cost profit analysis, and I've specialized in this with several restaurants. And before you look at the spreadsheet, I don't want to confuse you. I'll walk you through it in a minute. Imagine a restaurant. I've done this with a number of clients. My 2 most recent clients were just under $3 million each in annual sales, one single independent restaurant location. And based on this analysis, I showed them that in just about every menu category, their lower profit items were taking sales away from their highest profit items, and they were more popular dishes, and they were leaving lots of profit on the table and losing potential profit every single day. And I love to use a year's worth of data, and the point of sale system is where you get that data. You can print something called a product mix or a sales report that shows you the volume of sales over a period of time. So these restaurants change their menu annually, just once a year. So we had a year's worth of data. So imagine this business did $2.8, $2.9 million. This analysis showed each of them. One of them lost, or I should say, left a potential profit of $343,000 on the table last year, and the other one was closer to $360,000. And again, they're paying the highest wages in the kitchen to make anything, and they had absolutely no idea. What an eye-opener it is. And think about it. This is what you can control, folks, knowing exactly what it costs you to serve every dish, figuring out what's profitable to sell and what isn't profitable to sell. And then again, all this is a turnkey template in the academy. You can plug all this stuff in, or you can hire me to do it. But nonetheless, I can't think of anything that is a bigger needle mover right now to increase your profitability in your business. So I'm going to walk you through this really quickly. At the very top in green, I put it in green because obviously that represents money. The number one most popular, no, I'm sorry, the most profitable item on this menu was seafood stuffed shrimp. And every time they sold one, this restaurant made a profit of $17.88. Now, just under that, you'll see in red, it says profit spread. The spread is the profit difference, okay, ranked against the most profitable in descending order, number 2, number 3, number 4, going down the line. You'll see 80 cents, $3.14, and those obviously numbers are growing bigger, and that's lost potential profit because the difference, if you go down 3/4 of the way, you'll see chicken cordon bleu, and it says $6.24. That means that the chicken cordon bleu contributed $6.24 less profit than the seafood stuffed shrimp. And it was the number 2 most popular seller. They sold 1,800 of those versus only 516 of the seafood stuffed shrimp. And you can see that $11,000 was left on the table over the past year because that was a more popular item. Now, I know that not every item or not every guest is going to want to obviously pay high prices for certain things, but the point I'm making in is the spread or that profit difference in every category should be pennies and not dollars. And it is absolutely possible to design a menu where the difference is 75 cents or 80 cents. But when you're losing $3, $4, $5, $6, $10 or more every time you sell this versus that, you're spinning your wheels. You might be filling your seats. Your restaurant might be busy, but you're wondering why your bank account isn't growing. And it's simply because your menu is just not maximizing profitability. So what do you do about it? Well, simplifying the menu is something we've all had to do during the pandemic. Obviously, with shortage staff and whatnot, you couldn't prepare big menus anymore. You had to really figure out what could afford to go. And obviously, I highly suggest that you drop the lowest profit items, unless, of course, it is so popular that you can raise the price significantly and the market will bear that price because people absolutely love it and they'd kill you if you took it off the menu. And people understand that rising costs and inflation, we're all feeling it in the gas stations and in the supermarkets. So obviously communication is important, letting people know that, I'm not getting rich here, but I have to stay in business and I really appreciate supporting my business. We had to do a lot of that during the pandemic also, but simplifying the menu is important. Portion controls. I can't tell you how many restaurants I've worked with that don't have standard portion controls in place, and they have different people making the same menu items, and there's no consistency. And I can use pizza as an example because this happened to me 28 years ago when I first opened my business. I noticed that one person was putting 10 pieces of pepperoni on a pizza, and the very same size pizza, someone else was putting 14, and someone's putting 12 and 13. And I watched, and it was completely inconsistent. And I went to my kitchen manager. I'm like, what does the spec call for on this? How many pieces of pepperoni? And she told me 10 pieces. And I realized suddenly every time this other person makes the pizza and they're giving away 4 extra slices of pepperoni, and I'm literally selling hundreds and hundreds of pizzas every single week, think about how that increases your food cost simply because people were not trained to a standard. So I recommend that everyone has photographs of the plate presentation, complete specifications on how to make every dish, and then most importantly, you've got a check and balance system so that people are spot checking and looking at an item and making sure that the presentation is correct and that there aren't 14 pieces of pepperoni or extra, 2 scoops of ice cream with that pie a la mode when it should only be 1. You see these things happen all the time, but if you don't watch, it's going to happen and your food costs are going to rise. Ingredient choices. If you work with really knowledgeable suppliers, most of the broadline people have really experienced account managers that I don't know how they keep all these products in mind, especially when new products come in the door all the time, but they're experts on it. And I used to always ask them when something would spike, I'm like, what else could I sell here that's a great substitute that offers the same quality, but maybe your company bought it in greater volume and I can get it at a better price. Again, you don't ask, you don't get. And we swapped out ingredients all the time. As long as the quality was there, we would always try a sample in advance. But if the sample tasted great and if the flavor profile was the same, if I could get a better price for it, I was relentless about that. And that saved 3, 4, 5% on my food cost, all consistently over time. Okay, training staff. I already told you, once you know what your most profitable items are, those are the things you want your staff to suggest. And this is a short-term solution. You can also reprint a menu quickly and box those things in, or highlight them in yellow, or put icons next to them, call them guest favorites, call them most popular. But these are ways of drawing attention to your guests of your most profitable items. We did a lot of that too, until we redesigned the menu where everything contributed a very similar profit and the spread difference was pennies and not dollars. You have to raise prices today, of course, if the market will bear it. We talked about communication, and then back to the drawing board is working with your kitchen manager or your chef, or even the executive chefs at your suppliers. If you work with PFG or Cisco or US Foods, their kitchen people, the executive chefs are just as adept at costing out menus as they are at putting together beautiful food dishes. And even the account managers, some of them know this, and they'll help you cost out your menu. But nothing is more important than redesigning that menu where everything contributes, again, a very similar profit. All right, let's talk about daily break even, because this is another financial concept that's really important. I ask a lot of restaurants, how much does it cost you to open your doors every day? And they kind of scratch their head and they're like, I don't know. I'm like, you should know this. And why is it important today? Because with short staffing, a lot of restaurants have to close a day a week, even 2 days a week. And some of them don't know which day they should close. The Mondays, the Sundays, the Tuesdays, they all kind of blend together because a lot of them don't take copious notes about sales volume and pay attention to this stuff. So knowing how much it costs to open the doors, you walk up to your business, you put the key in the lock, you turn the door, you open it up, you put the lights on, you bring in the staff, you got a walk-in full of food, and you're paying all these expenses every single day. It's the same amount. There's a cost involved to do all that. And the only way you would know that is if you assembled all of your invoices, whether an accountant does this, your office manager, or you yourself have a file cabinet in the office, or everything's on the computer. You need a list of every single expense that your restaurant has on a monthly basis. There are two kinds of costs: fixed costs and variable costs. Unless you've taken an accounting course, you might not know what that means. So a fixed cost is every expense that you have that you absolutely have to pay every single month, with your business is open 7 days a week or it's closed permanently during the pandemic. You still have to pay these things. And those costs are the lease on your space or your mortgage. Obviously, your mortgage, the rent, the insurances, all those things, phone, internet, the dumpster in the parking lot. You got to pay that dumpster service a couple $100 to have a dumpster, whether you're open or closed. These are all fixed costs. A variable cost is something that goes up or down depending on the days that you're open, or the hours even that you're open. Things like cost of goods, heating oil, if you're heated with propane or oil, that sort of thing. Your payroll, certainly. Your payroll is obviously less if you're open 5 days a week versus 7 days. That's why it's a variable cost. So we have a spreadsheet, again, with an audio tutorial that teaches you how to do this in the Academy. But again, you list these things on a monthly basis, and then this spreadsheet automatically divides by 30 days, because more months have 30 days than 31, and it averages out to give you a number. And that number might be $900, or that number might be $2,000. It depends on the size of your business, the number of seats, all that kind of thing, and what your expenses are. But if you're not at least hitting, say, $900, if that's your daily break even, with consistency every single Monday or Tuesday or whatever it is, and if you can't come up with a special program to drive business on those slower days, and again, we teach you how to do that in the Academy too, this is how you decide which days to close. If you can at least hit $900, which is the point at which you're not making a profit, but you're not losing money, that's your break even. So if you consistently on a Tuesday are hitting $700 worth of sales, or $850, it's going to cost you less money to close on that day than actually to be open and serve 5 people or 10 people or however many people walk in the door, if it's less than that break even amount. Okay, let's talk about the Alphon grant. We're just about done here with the presentation, but this is a really important program, and not a lot of people have heard about it yet. And thanks to Hospitality Maine and the staff there and Derek, we're spreading the word on this. But obviously, there's a lot of money that has been given through the Alphon Grant Compact program through Maine Workforce Development. And there's a URL at the bottom of the screen. It's Alphon training at mccs.me.edu, and that stands for the Maine Community College System in the state of Maine. And they are putting this program forward where any training that you pay in your restaurant is paid or reimbursed to you at 50%. And all you have to do is register to be a compact member, a participating business. And then whether you buy an online training program such as the Academy, which is certainly qualified, or if you bring in a consultant or a coach, or even myself, or if you put any kind of training in place in your business, chances are it qualifies, and it'll only cost you 50% of the actual cost. And the state of Maine, this Alphon grant, will pay the rest. So I totally recommend you do that. I've been working with a number of clients under this program in the state of Maine, and also giving presentations through Chamber of Commerce's for hospitality members, and all of that has been reimbursed. So it's a great program, and no time is like the present to take advantage of it. Okay, let's talk about the Restaurant Rockstars Academy really quickly. I created the Academy years ago, and it's literally everything I've learned in almost 30 years in not only starting a restaurant, everything in the logistics module. If you were starting a restaurant for the very first time, it literally teaches you everything you need to know to open the doors of that restaurant. And then the subsequent modules are all about increasing profits, delivering great guest service, increasing sales. Everything I talked about today is literally included in the Academy. So the second module is all about finances, and we covered a couple of the spreadsheets, but they're included, and they have turnkey spreadsheet formulas that are completely locked, so you can't mess them up. And then there's a tutorial that you listen to in less than 5 minutes that even if you hate math, you're terrible at numbers, we teach you what the numbers mean, where to find them, how to plug them into the spreadsheet, what the bottom line results should look like. I call that the sweet spot, and then common mistakes to avoid that other restaurant owners and managers have made. So complete turnkey financial system there, everything about putting an inventory system in place. And I say that because there's so many restaurants that think inventory is walking around figuring out what the order is that week versus calculating the true value of their cost of goods on hand at any given point in time. And you need to know that in order to know what your food cost is, your beverage cost every single week, and also calculating your labor cost and staying in that sweet spot. And we talk about labor cost abuses that are seemingly innocent that cost you hundreds of dollars a week. And we can help you obviously put a stop to that, because I had that problem so many years ago. So I've created all these systems to help you avoid all the mistakes that restaurant owners can and do make, and teach you finances from a very foundational level. And it's critically important in your business. The menu profit piece, I talked about that, how to cost out your menu. We teach you that. The template to plug all this stuff in, and you press the go button and it shows you where you're losing money every single day across every menu category and what to do about it. The fourth module is staff training. It's called Sales Stars, and it's a hospitality crash course in show business and entertainment and product knowledge and restaurant knowledge that is proven to increase check averages and deliver amazing dining experiences. So that's a turnkey program. We have a marketing section that's obviously all about affinity. It's all about trackable marketing. So many restaurants waste so many thousands of dollars because someone calls them on the phone and say, hey, Roger, you should advertise on the radio, and, we'll drive lots of business. And maybe you try that. That's an experiment, but it's not trackable unless everyone that walks in your business says, hey, Joe, hey, Roger, you're a great guy. I heard your commercial on the radio and that's what brought me in. That never happens. You'd never know if those thousands of dollars spent on any of these marketing programs actually work. So we have proven marketing programs that I use. The cash cow idea is in there. I actually created a custom branded lottery ticket for my business that brought in new business and repeat business with an average check of $80 for a two-top that cost me virtually nothing. We teach you how to do all these things. And then finally, there's an efficiencies module. And best of all, you can now assign any of this information to any of your team members in your business. And it's a perfect way of developing your leadership team. They can learn the finances section and put all these systems in place for you. If you have a dining room manager or even a training leader, then you can assign the Sales Stars program to them. So any of this stuff can literally be assigned to your team. And the price is just $59 a month, and you can cancel at any time. We have a money back guarantee, of course. And it's something you're going to use in your business to put those systems in place. So that's the Academy. We call it the Ultimate Restaurant Startup and Leadership Resource. It's available 24/7. You do not have to follow it in any particular order. You figure out what your priorities are, what's most important to your business, and you can dive into the marketing section or the staff training section first, or the menu costing or the finance piece. You decide. You can follow it at your own pace in any order you choose, and it's there 24/7 on any device, and it's only $59 a month. And you find that at restaurantrockstars.com. And then finally, let me just tell you about the podcast. I've done this now for 5 years. We have released, I'd say, 340 episodes over the past 5 years, and I interview leading operators across the country in every aspect of the business, whether they're owners of restaurants, whether they're general managers or they're CEOs of large restaurant groups. Some pretty famous names have been on the podcast, the Cheesecake Factory, some really big names. It's all about marketing, guest service, finances, best practices, technology, anything that we can deliver to our audience that'll help them improve their business, and it's all for free. And you can subscribe on any of the major podcast players, just typing in Restaurant Rockstars, or if you go to restaurantrockstars.com, you can actually receive it in your email inbox every single week. No strings attached. I'm not sending you any spam. You just get the podcast. We release it 2 ways: as a video, because some people like to watch my guests and watch me interview them via Zoom, of course, and some people like to listen, so you can just put the headphones in and walk your dog or drive to work and hear the podcast. And then we archive all of the past episodes on the website at restaurantrockstars.com. Some of our top episodes have gotten over 4,000 and 5,000 plays each, so it's become quite popular. So that's it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you for Hospitality Maine, Derek and Kathleen, for spreading the word on this. There is a recording available, so maybe you took some notes, and if you missed it, you can always refer back to that. And everything I talked about is available at restaurantrockstars.com. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Roger. As you've been following along, I dropped some of the links of the items that Roger was talking about in the chat. So before you log out, if you click those links, you'll be able to save them so you can get right back to what he was talking about, including his Rockstars Ready website, the Maine Community College Workforce Compact, and the employee retention tax credit. The Chamber of Commerce has a great little one-pager on that will summarize exactly what Roger was talking about for that credit. So thank you very much. Anybody have any questions for Roger?
So thank you, Roger. Actually, that's a lot of information. It's valuable for me, and I found like I learned new stuff from you. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate your information, because it's increased and enriched my knowledge about restaurant and hospitality in general.
Oh, that's
Thank
great.
you.
Oh, that's kind of you to say. Thank you very much. I appreciate your kind words.
Thank you
Happy
so much. Thank you. Thank you.
If you have any questions after the webinar, you could feel free to reach out to me. I love talking shop with operators, and I'd love to help you out. And if you email me, my email address is Roger, ROGER, @restaurantrockstars.com. So if anything comes up in the future, feel free to drop me a line, and I'll get right back to you on that. Anything else?
And I just dropped your contact information in the chat as well. I had it at the beginning, but it's probably scrolled up on everybody's screen by now. So, all right, without any questions, it sounds like. Thank you very much, Roger, and have a great afternoon.
Stay well, everyone. Thank you very much.